In the previous video, I mentioned that the period, definition of the period in circular motion is the time to rotate once, or the number of seconds per rotation or per revolution. However, it was related to the definition of a period in sine functions and cosine functions. And we can see where that comes in this following image here. There's a circle, well, it's approximately a circle, and we've got on the horizontal axis here, we have the angle. Here we have the amplitude in the y-axis, and of course you can see the circle. So if we place a dot right there, there's where we start. There's the red arrow is our location, and we're at 0 and 0 degrees, and we're at 0. We're right on the axis of the circle. If we go up 30 degrees, about 30 degrees, we can see that we have a dot at 30 degrees. This is supposed to represent 30 degrees, but of course it's really just a kind of a conceptual view of it, a qualitative view. And that represents 30 degrees. So you can see that, in fact, the sine of 30 degrees is really a measure of how high up above the x-axis that dot really is. Then we have 45 degrees, okay? Then we have 60 degrees, and then we have 90 degrees, and the sine of 90 is 1, and that's because if the sine of 90 degrees equals 1, and that's because it essentially reflects the length of the radius vector of the circle. And if the radius were 3 meters, then the amplitude would actually be 3 meters. So if we keep going now, we now are at 120 degrees, and you can see we're starting to go back down now. We're dropping, our height is now being reduced. And as we keep going around, there's 180, we're back where we were sort of, but we're pointed in the negative x direction at this point now. And if you notice in the circle, it hasn't returned to its starting point. You might argue that the sine has returned to its starting point, but it's not actually returned to it in the same direction that it reached it. So in the circle, we're actually pointed in the negative x direction now. So we keep going here to 10 and so on. 270, here we're at the bottom extent of the motion. The sine of 270 is equal to a -1. So that would be a -1 here. This would be a +1 up here. And then we keep going until we get back to where we started from, 360 degrees. And so that's the relationship between the sine and circular motion. So the period means in a circle, it means you've returned to the origin of where you started, but it also means that the sine function or the cosine function has returned to its original location. If you start with the cosine function, for the cosine, you would start here, okay, which means you would start here, and you would go all the way around, and then you continue up until you got back to here again. And so this would be the cosine function starting from there. Okay.